Welcome everyone to the Innovative Wisconsin EV Solutions webinar, proudly presented by EnTech Solutions, Faith Technologies, Wisconsin Biogas Council, and Wisconsin Clean Cities. On behalf of all of the co-hosts, thank you so much for joining us today. I'm Kelly Verbeck, Program Specialist of Wisconsin Clean Cities, and I will serve as moderator for today's webinar. We are looking forward to a great event and are so glad to have you with us here today. Today, you will hear from a great lineup of experts in the field about how Wisconsin companies and organizations are supporting EV adoption and EV charging options throughout the state, as well as what options and incentives are available to help your organization become part of the solution. We'd like to thank all of our speakers for joining us today. We will be hosting a live Q&A session following today's presentation, so make sure to type your questions into the chat or questions box, and we will be sure to get to as many questions as we can. Today's presentations and a recording of this webinar will be on the Wisconsin Clean Cities website following today's presentation. Don't forget to check out our website to see all of the great events coming up. I would now like to turn things over to Lorrie, Lisek, Executive Director of Wisconsin Clean Cities, who will provide a quick overview of Wisconsin Clean Cities and some of the key grants and projects that we're working on relative to EVs. Welcome, Lorrie.
Well, good morning, Kelly. Thank you. Wisconsin Clean Cities is a nonprofit organization that serves the entire state of Wisconsin. We were established in 1994 and is one of the U.S. Department of Energy's more than 75 Clean Cities coalitions. The organizations support our nation's energy security and economic security by building partnerships to advance affordable domestic transportation fuels, energy efficient mobility systems, and other fuel savings technologies and practices. Wisconsin Clean Cities achieves this in a number of ways, including the advancement of alternative fuels, alternative fuel vehicles, and sustainable vehicle technology such as electric vehicles and their charging infrastructure. The efforts reduce our nation's dependence on imported oil, improve air quality, support local jobs, drive economic development, and promote improved quality of life, all part of the Clean Cities mission. Collectively, Clean Cities coalitions have displaced nearly 10 billion gallons of imported petroleum since the program's inception in 1993. Public, private, and nonprofit entities collaborate with Clean Cities via a membership system to implement sustainable transportation solutions. The Wisconsin Clean Cities mission is supported through education and outreach, training, project management, grant and funding acquisition, and development of stakeholder partnerships. We're pleased to announce that we're currently a participant in more than 10 separate grant-funded projects, many of which address electric vehicles and electric vehicle infrastructure known as EVSE, or Electric Vehicle Supply Equipment. I will talk about those grants in greater detail later on in the webinar.
Now I'd like to go ahead and introduce Matthew Christman, Executive Director of the Wisconsin Biogas Council. Welcome, Matthew.
Good morning and welcome to the Innovative Wisconsin's EV Solutions webinar. The Wisconsin Biogas Council is proud to partner with EnTech Solutions, Faith Technologies, and Wisconsin Clean Cities to provide you with the most important information needed when considering the deployment of electric vehicle charging infrastructure for your operation or customer needs. I am Matthew Christman, Executive Director of Wisconsin Biogas Council. The Wisconsin Biogas Council's mission is to advance the biogas economy of Wisconsin through collaboration, education, and research to achieve sustainable communities, environmental improvement, and energy independence. Electric vehicles and the charging infrastructure to support them is a critical component in effective climate change and decarbonization efforts. The greatest opportunity for reduced emissions come from the use of renewable natural gas. In the California Low Carbon Fuel Standard, renewable natural gas from dairy farms, when used for the generation of electricity, has a carbon intensity score of -300 to 600 grams of CO2 equivalent per megajoule. Environmental benefits are not the only reason to consider this transition, however. Electric vehicles provide significant economic benefits, both in the commercial and personal use markets. With greater efficiency, decreased maintenance costs, reduced noise, and no direct emissions, the electric vehicles currently available can meet many of the daily needs of consumers in light, medium, and heavy-duty applications. Wisconsin's dairy and food industries offer both fleet demand and fuel generation opportunities. Other industries can benefit from food waste diversion, wastewater treatment, and landfill gas to greatly reduce their carbon impact while sourcing fuel locally. By participating in the deployment of electric vehicle charging infrastructure, you are provided with opportunities to internalize fuel costs, reduce price volatility, and have a voice in the source of energy that is powering your vehicles. Thank you for attending. I look forward to learning more and supporting the deployment of this technology market. Thank you.
And thank you, Matthew, for providing that overview on the Wisconsin Biogas Council. I'd now like to introduce Wade Leipold, Vice President of Solutions for Faith Technologies, and Steve Nieland, Vice President of Energy System Engineering for EnTech Solutions. Welcome, Wade and Steve.
Thank you, Kelly.
Thank you, Kelly.
Thank you for having us. Excited to be here, share a little bit about the Faith brand of companies, take a quick look at what the EV market looks like, and then really deep dive into that electrification infrastructure journey and some of the considerations you should take into account as you're making that journey. To start with though, I'd like to provide just a brief overview of those Faith family of companies. Really, Faith is able to provide the full spectrum of support from design build through the operation and maintain and optimization, starting with Faith, which brings expertise in the form of our overall solutions for industrial automation, building automation, energy management and monitoring, pre-construction services, including full engineering services and 3D modeling capabilities, and then a nationwide electrical construction capability. Sliding all the way to the right, our Accelerate arm is our manufacturing capability that we're able to build assemblies in modular buildings and components for our construction teams, therefore reducing our overall on-site labor, bringing overall productivity and efficiencies into our builds, and providing a safer environment for that build out, and also reducing the overall impact for our customers and clients, and being able to implement them in a much quicker and efficient manner. And then EnTech, Steve?
Our third branch within the Faith organization is EnTech Solutions. We're the energy delivery arm of Faith Technologies. So our mission basically is deliver the most cost-effective, resilient, and sustainable energy to our clients for their sites. We do that through 4 different areas. One is distributed energy. So that would be what we look at, both grid connected and islandable energy solutions. In sustainable fuels, which include biogas, renewable natural gas, biofuels, asset management. So in the right instances, we also own, maintain, and operate those assets for our clients. And then also providing EV charging infrastructure for electrical vehicle purposes. So we are your trusted energy experts. We're nationwide, so we are able to practice across the country. We have field offices, Wisconsin, Idaho, Kansas, I'm going to think Oklahoma, Georgia, across the nation. We are the largest top 20 for electrical design engineering firms in the United States. And we're in the top 24 electrical execution also on the electrical construction side. We've been around a long time. We're headquartered here in Wisconsin. We have a large Wisconsin presence. And we're able to help basically you with your energy solutions from concept through execution, ongoing optimization, and management.
So starting to take a look at that electric vehicle market, very excited to be part of this and to be able to support it and drive that infrastructure for this market. I don't think there's a day that goes by where there's not another news headline coming out about a new battery company or battery technology and new vehicles that are entering the market, or new charging capability and infrastructure out there. If you take a look at the graphic on the right-hand side, it really shows this increase in demand that we're seeing for electric vehicles. By the year 2037, you can see there estimated over 6 million electric vehicle sales per year. That's starting where we are, 2021, 2020 here at just around 500,000 vehicles per year. A lot of this is being driven, there's rising concerns around emission, climate change, government regulation, especially at a state level with California, but then also tax incentives, grants that are being made available to help with that transition over to electrification. We're seeing an awful lot of investment from OEMs. A lot at the beginning of this year, auto industries coming across saying they will switch 100% to electric vehicles by 2035, 2040 timeframe. Right now, currently, there's 26 US EV models available. And not only the light duty, which we've obviously seen a lot of momentum in that area, but also medium duty and heavy duty trucks. We're seeing more and more entries into this space and continuing to build out that capability. Really starting at that last mile delivery right now, that from distribution center to storefront, but then as we continue to move forward and the battery technology continues to increase, how does that support overall long haul capability? EVs are definitely becoming more mainstream, and that risk, that anxiety fear of losing the charge is starting to go away, especially as we see more and more EV chargers appear throughout the nation. But taking a look at the number of vehicles that are coming about, that needs to increase, and it needs to increase substantially. A quick estimate here shows that by the year 2030, we're going to need over 30 million electrical vehicle charging systems that are deployed. And this is going to look a lot different than we've seen in our current situation with fueling stations. As we move forward, obviously utilities are going to be a big piece of being able to support these chargers, but we're going to need more than just utilities. What are some other generation means that are going to need to be put in place in order to support this huge demand moving forward? We're also seeing this fueling looking different. People aren't going to be going to a fueling station. We see a lot of these obviously being put into residential spaces to charge your personal vehicle. We are seeing public infrastructure charging stations that are opening up, and that network is continuing to expand. And I know getting on a couple apps out there, really you're able to start making road trips now with electric vehicles. And then I think another big change is really going to be around that fleet customer and how are they going to support their overall electric vehicle needs, and bringing that charging capability back to their depots, back to their staging areas where their vehicles sit or where their vehicles are being unloaded or loaded on a continuous basis. As that demand, as the number of vehicles those fleet customers have, they are definitely going to need to look at other means to provide the capacity that will be required to charge those vehicles. And not only from a capacity standpoint, but also realizing what some of those charges, what some of the electric utility charges and demand rate impacts going to be as they move down this journey of electrification.
So as Wade mentioned, one of the biggest challenges we see as we look at electrification is how does the existing electrical distribution infrastructure support those installations? It's going to be very difficult, especially as we start looking at some of the more advanced charging solutions, the level 3 supercharger, if you will, solutions that are in place. They create a large demand on the electrical grid, and in many places, the grid is just not able to support that or able to support that economically, to Wade's point, talking about demand charges, that type of thing. Also, just physically not being able to support that also. So what we look at is, what are those ways that maybe, we can look at other alternatives to deliver energy to those solutions beyond the conventional electrical grid. And while we're doing that, how do we make that more sustainable? Because part of the reason, I want to convert to an EV is I want something that's cleaner energy. I want something that's more sustainable, that works for renewables. I don't want to be taking electricity that's powered from a coal-fired power plant to do that, right? So I want to look at what can I do that's more sustainable and that provides more localized energy production also to relieve some of that that stress that we're going to see on the grid from all those chargers coming into place.
So shifting gears here, or in the electrification world, I guess we don't have gears anymore, just moving forward. I want to take a look at what does this electrification journey look like. As we work with a lot of customers out there, this has been a pretty standardized process that we've been working with them, and we'll go into a bit more detail on the preceding slides, but it really starts with the upfront assessment, understanding what your current needs are, what those needs will look like as we continue to move into the future, what engineering is going to be required in order to meet that solution, not only today, but also in the future. How are we going to source the infrastructure itself, and what finance options are out there in order to support those purchases, getting the physical installation done, and then taking a look at how do you continue to operate and then optimize that to make sure you're getting the performance that you expect out of your charging infrastructure. So with that, it really starts with this assessment. You need to understand your current energy needs. What are they today? And what does that look like in the future as you continue to bring on more electric vehicles, continue to install more charging equipment? You need to consider the overall long-term total cost of ownership. We're seeing a lot of customers right now, they're doing pilots, they're understanding what does electrification mean. They're putting in a single charger maybe only in a single vehicle, but they do have plans for that to grow. How do you, if you have to rip up the concrete, rip up your parking lot, how do you make sure you put additional conduits and stuff in the ground right at the get-go so that you can put in additional chargers without as significant as a significant cost as there may be. So with this too, it's also, as you start this journey, to have a good understanding of what vehicles are you looking at? How big of battery does that vehicle have? How fast are you going to need to charge it? How many times a day are you going to need to charge that? As we start to put all these pieces together to kick this off, we can really then take a look at what does that overall assessment look like and what would be that best solution for you as you move forward. Next slide. There are tools that are out there, and I highly suggest as you move down this journey is taking advantage of some of these tools. If you have these tools yourself or working with partners and able to provide this capability. So as you understand the vehicles you're going to have, how fast you need to charge, how many times a day you need to charge, how can you start doing some of that modeling? And that modeling is very important. You can understand what your current capacity is, what is the capacity that you'll need going forth. You can model out what a utility bill would look like if you would continue to stay on just grid connecting all of your devices, what impact that may have on demand charges. You can play around, and if you had different distributed energy resources, maybe bringing in solar or battery energy storage system, how would that offset some of this cost and what would that look like? So there's a multitude of tools out there that are able to help in these assessments and help drive those decisions. And those decisions, again, not just for today, but looking at in the future, where do you want to go on your electrification journey? How many vehicles do you really want, are you going to have potentially within your fleet? Another really important area to take a look at through this assessment process are what are the grants and incentives that are out there. And I'm glad to see Lorrie kick it off really on that note. Electric vehicles, especially on a medium duty and heavy duty standpoint, tend to be a little bit more expensive. You can see the light duty vehicles, they're starting to become some parity. Those costs are going to continue to drive down from a vehicle standpoint. As you know, battery technology continues to increase, drives down the overall cost for battery systems. Obviously, the vehicles, there's less maintenance on electric vehicles, and there's some savings there. But then you need to take a look at that electric vehicle, that infrastructure, that charging infrastructure that's going to be needed, and what are some of those costs. There's numerous grants, incentives, and subsidies out there at a federal level, at a state level, at a locality level. It's really important to look into those, either personally within your teams if you have that capability, or again, partnering with someone that can help take a look at what grants, incentives, subsidies are out there, and even help with applying for some of those grants if you're eligible for them. They can have significant offsets, not only for the vehicle themselves, but for the charging infrastructure, the charger, or even bringing in new services or bringing in distributed energy resources like solar or battery energy storage.
So when we're doing that upfront assessment and you're looking at your installation, you know, the next consideration from that is the engineering of the site itself. So again, you don't want to kind of pigeonhole yourself into a corner. You want to make sure that you're looking at not just your current needs, but your future needs. You want to make sure that that your selections you're making are scalable but dynamic. So as your needs change, the system can be flexible and change too, and you're not starting over from square one. Some of the ways we look at that, for an example, you know, here's a site layout, for example, of a let's say of a distribution center, and we've got EV charging that they're looking at setting up. Well, it may make more sense, for instance, looking at how not just where it makes sense to put an EV charger, but how the business operates also. So for instance, if you have a warehouse and you have trucks that are loading at that warehouse for 2 or 3 hours a day, make more sense maybe to locate those chargers at those loading docks, right? So I can be charging while I'm loading and it's not an extra step maybe in my process. Also, where do I need to expand in the future? Maybe I currently only have a few EV vehicles in my fleet. I'm going to be adding more in the future though. So to Wade's point, I think he mentioned earlier, I'm adding some extra maybe conduits, right, to supply those chargers in the future, or I'm looking at how I can maybe share circuitry between the chargers to kind of spread that load across the facility. Again, want to look beyond just what the energy needs are, but how does your facility operate now and in the future, so we have the right infrastructure put in place when you start looking at those EV charging solutions. From financing standpoint, there's many different paths we can take to financing. So we can look at energy as a service, we can look at charging as a service, we can look at owner-owned infrastructure, and there's advantages and disadvantages to each of those depending on how you want to look at those as a business or an individual. And we'll take a little bit deeper dive into each of those also here. So again, looking at energy as a service or charging as a service, upfront capital cost ends up being paid by the third party. They put the equipment in place. The capital cost then is an operational cost to you, right? I'm going to then bill you per charge, or it's going to be billed as a lease where you lease equipment or lease the infrastructure. You're able to look at that as an operating cost instead of a capital cost. Advantage, I'm looking at it from a conventional standpoint. Same type of contracting as fuel and equipment from a fossil fuel company currently, right? I've got known and predictable costs. I know how much a charge is going to cost, or I know how much my monthly service is going to cost. It simplifies your operation. It frees up your working capital. On the other hand, maybe slightly more costly because I'm going to be paying some type of operating charge on top of that, right? That's going to be part of that either charge value or that lease value. But again, I've got that capital freed for other investments. The other side then is a capital investment. So I can build and I can own and I can put the project into my own. I can pay for that up front. I'm then going to amortize that cost over a number of years. When I look at it operationally, I can then take care of maintaining that site myself, or I can contract for those O&M services. Depends on what I'm comfortable with. Depends on the personnel, the staffing, the experience we have. I'm gonna be paying the utility for the electricity, so I'm gonna have to plan for that. If I look at energy as a service, or if I look at charging as a service, typically the electricity is included as part of that service, as part of that fee that I'm paying. If I'm gonna own it from a capital investment, I need to make sure I take that into account, because I'm gonna have to be paying for the electricity and the effect it's gonna have in my service from a demand charge standpoint, from a utilization standpoint. Benefits. I may have more operational savings and gains. Again, be able to take more of that on direct cost myself. I'm not going to be paying for somebody else to maintain that. I can build my own team's capabilities. So if I'm planning on long-term having a larger installation, a larger EV charging infrastructure, I've got the ability to start small and start building the knowledge within my team to a point where I can handle that when I'm at a larger scale. And the other piece of that is I have full in-house control then, right? So I'm able to directly choose what components I'm going to utilize, how I'm going to utilize it. I have more control. More control means, though, I'm also going to have to build more knowledge about that installation and how it operates and what the most efficient way to operate that installation is.
And as move through that stage and you have an assessment done, understanding what that design looks like, how are we going to source it, finance options behind that, it comes down to the installation. And again, different ways to do this. Is this something that you'd want to take on yourself? What's interesting about electric vehicle, the infrastructure piece, is there's a couple different trades normally that are involved. Obviously, there's an electrical contractor involved. A lot of times there's some amount of civil work that's involved, concrete pads that need to be poured to put the equipment on. Potentially there's some trenching or ditches that need to be created, depending again where that electrical infrastructure is going to be installed. So some considerations to take a look at is, do you want to do this in-house, or would you want to partner with someone potentially for a one-stop shop, someone that can do all of that work for you? Are you doing this at a national level or just local? Do you have many facilities across the US? If so, are you looking for that national partner that could support all of those facilities, or is it a single installation? It goes along with the execution of the projects, how many projects you want to do at any particular time. And as I stated at the beginning, modularization. What opportunities do you potentially have there to create modular packages for very quick deployment? If you need to rip up your parking lots or other areas, there's an impact to your business. How can you minimize that overall impact to your business? Have that charging infrastructure up and running and supporting your vehicles as soon as you possibly can.
And to Wade's point, that's another important point as we're looking at those assessment and engineering stages too, as you're going through those, to look at, are you going to be a single site or are you going to be multi-site? If you're multi-site, are you looking at similar infrastructure? And as you go through the assessment, that design phase, can you come up with a solution that is repeatable across your sites also to minimize, again, that upfront cost for each of those?
Good point. And then this leads to operate. So now your system, it's deployed, it's up and operational. What's needed now? How is this system continuing to operate and be maintained? Again, do you have individuals on staff that are able to take on some of these requirements that may be needed, or would you look for someone that you can partner with? You'd want to make sure that it's obviously operating to design specifications. What's the preventative and predictive maintenance that needs to be done? Chargers have fans, have filters in them. Those filters need to be changed on a regular basis. There's other maintenance activities that should be checked on. And is that something that you're able to provide, or you'd want someone else to provide? And it really does lead back into some of those finance options that you have also, depending if it's capital equipment you would own, or it would be equipment that you would lease, and that maintenance would be taken care of by somebody else. There's a multitude of applications that are out there that help both on the operation standpoint and then along with optimizing. We started this off from the assessment and talking about some of the modeling tools that are out there to help you understand what the impact would be of putting those chargers on site, and as you continue to grow with chargers, what the impact would be for your utility bill if you would look at other distributed energy systems in order to support it. It's very important too at the back end with optimization is to use those same modeling tools again. Are you getting what you paid for? Is it producing what you thought it was producing? Are the chargers running where they need to be running in order to support your fleet? So some continuing maintenance and operations that need to go on here, and then taking a look at the analytics behind it so that you make sure that it's always working at peak performance.
And to that optimization point, it even comes down to, again, comparing how the site is operating, comparing that to your original design. Am I operating the chargers the way I thought I would be? Or, you know what, I'm finding I need to charge at different intervals, different times than I originally thought. Okay, I need now to go back and reassess how I utilize the chargers to make sure I'm maximizing my usage and minimizing my impact from a financial standpoint on my business also.
So in summary, there's a lot of solutions that are available, a lot of things to consider as you move through this journey. It's something that absolutely you could take on yourself, and there are a ton of partners out there that would help work with you in order to support this overall electrification journey. Definitely need to take into account what are your total operating costs? What does this mean as you move forth with electrification? And that's really where this upfront modeling and assessment really can help. What is that impact going to be? What are your costs going to be? Not only the initial upfront cost, but your ongoing cost. And is there ways to potentially offset some of those? Making sure that you take advantage of grants and incentives also upfront to offset that cost. Resiliency is definitely important. We're talking about electric vehicles now. You can't drive down the block to a local gas station and fill up with fuel. If the power goes out at your charging location, you're not able to charge that vehicle. That could inhibit you from driving. It could inhibit fleets from making their deliveries. Definitely something you want to take into account as you move forward to make sure that that vehicle is always going to be available for you when needed. And then sustainability, what does that mean? What are the reasons that you want to move to an electric vehicle? Is it due to some reduced cost in fuel and in operations? Are you moving more for the emissions standpoint, the sustainability standpoint? If those are the case, what options do you want to take when taking a look at your EV charging infrastructure to support your electric vehicle? It's very important to really start with a plan and then work that plan moving forward to make sure that you get the installation that you want.
In fact, one thing we'll often look at, you know, as far as the summary, is look at some type of a scorecard, right? So you can rank where your importance is. You know, is sustainability more important to me than operating cost? Is operating cost more important? What is the weighting on each of those? So as I look at that installation, I'm getting a good comparison of my various solutions.
And I think, Kelly, that wraps it up for us. There's some contact information for EnTech here. And then within the deck, obviously contact information for Steve and myself, if anyone would want to reach out after this webinar with any additional questions or comments.
Thank you, Wade and Steve, for that joint presentation and providing us with some more insight on innovative EV solutions in Wisconsin. We'll ask you to turn off your cameras and then we'll welcome you back on for the Q&A session a little bit later. There are several grant programs that are supporting these efforts, many of which can help you and your organization adopt EVs and their charging infrastructure. Lorrie Lisek is going to tell you a little bit more about the key grants and projects Wisconsin Clean Cities is currently working on relative to EVs. So welcome back, Lorrie.
Thanks, Kelly, and thank you, Steve and Wade, for that great presentation. Much of what you were talking about are some of the projects that we're working on are also dealing with those same issues and addressing some of those barriers that you also were discussing. We just wanted to give you a real quick update on some of the projects that are happening in Wisconsin right now, and there might be some that you might want to get involved in. So Wisconsin Clean Cities is really proud to be leading the Drive Electric Wisconsin project. The project is part of Drive Electric USA, which is a partnership of 14 states and the U.S. Department of Energy Clean Cities coalitions working to significantly advance electric vehicle adoption in all of these states. This is a project that we're just getting started on, and we are looking for partners to work with us to develop a great plan for the state of Wisconsin. The activities, outputs, and outcomes in the project are built on 7 priority areas of focus work, including we're going to create and strengthen branded statewide drive electric programs in each state and help to build capacity of those programs. We're going to provide education to consumers and develop multiple local EV electric vehicle chapters in all states. We're going to directly engage and help to educate utilities and state regulators. We're going to advance infrastructure in all the states via a statewide corridor, regional and community electric vehicle charging planning, including a focus on low income or limited income communities around the states. And additionally, we will help to provide education to state and local government officials regarding EV policies and best practices. And we will engage with dealerships and manufacturers to develop state-based preferred EV dealer programs, including light duty, medium duty projects, and significantly increase electric vehicle fleet adoption across many types of fleets and sizes of vehicles. So much of what Steve and Wade were talking about in their presentation, these are things that we're going to be looking at, and we're very fortunate. We're one of the only Midwest states that are involved in this program, but we will have the opportunity to work with states across the country and develop this program. So we're very excited about that and looking for partners to get involved with us. So if this is something that would be of interest to you, please feel free to reach out to us. We also have a couple other grants that we're working on. The VCI MUD grant, we call it. It's for multi-unit dwellings, and we are pleased to partner with the Center for Sustainable Energy along with 12 other Clean Cities coalitions and a host of other project partners on vehicle charging innovations for multi-unit dwelling projects. This is a 3-year project with funding from the U.S. Department of Energy's Vehicle Technologies Office. Wisconsin Clean Cities is working to engage stakeholders to adopt barriers to multi-unit dwelling and residential curbside charging stations, demonstrate innovative technologies that address barriers, compile project findings in an easy-to-use toolkit which we will disseminate across the national, regional, and state and local channels. Wisconsin Clean Cities is currently collecting baseline multi-unit dwelling and residential curbside charging station utilization data and developing innovative technology demonstration plans. Any organization interested in providing historical charging station utilization and data or participating in a demonstration project is encouraged to contact us because we would like to really get you involved in this. Additionally, one of the projects that we've been working on for about 3 years, about 2.5 years, I guess, is the Michigan to Montana I-94 Clean Fuel Corridor Project, or M2M, which aims to fill gaps along alternative fueling and electric vehicle charging along Interstate I-94 from Port Huron, Michigan to Billings, Montana. And we are very excited about this project. We have filled some gaps along the corridor. We have signage now that goes from the Illinois line up through Madison regarding electric vehicle infrastructure that's available. We have a small gap that we're looking to fill in the Dells area, and we're working on that. And then we will have our fast charging network across the state of Wisconsin. Additionally, the corridor is also for natural gas and propane. So we do have an additional propane station that's being installed. And then we have also provided funding to some fleets that will be using the corridor to fuel and to travel along. So that project has been very successful and is coming to a little bit of an end. But if you have some interest in that, we would love to hear from you about that as well. And we are, through the Drive Electric Wisconsin program, going to be looking at developing other corridors across the state. So if you're interested in learning more about how Clean Cities can help you maximize the benefits of these and other grant programs, please don't hesitate to contact us. As Steve and Wade mentioned, there are many tools that are out there, and through Clean Cities, we have these tools that are available through the U.S. Department of Energy, and we'd love to share that information with you. So now I'd like to welcome back our presenters for our question and answers portion. So if you can unmute yourself and turn your cameras back on, we would appreciate it. And attendees, if you have any additional questions that you would like to submit to our presenters, please feel free to do that. So we'll just get started here and do some kickoff. Thank you again for your great presentations. It was very informative, and it's always great to hear what other companies are doing and how we can work together and collaborate to move this process forward. So occasionally we get concerns that from some of our participants that adding too many EVs will put a strain on our electrical grid and the charging. How do you respond to that? I don't know whoever would like to take that.
Steve, do you want to kick it off?
I'll kick it off. So, I think that's a great question, and one of the ways that we respond to that is we look for ways to cite, other energy sources, closer to that utilization. So again, is it possible to augment maybe the site with some solar or solar with battery storage so we can relieve that pressure off the grid? And I think we're going to see more of that for two reasons. One is I want to be able to not have to strain the grid so much as I add these charging solutions, but two, I want to look for more sustainable solutions also. I want to look at it incorporating more renewables. And again, the best way to do that is to utilize those as close to the point of use as possible to help with both of those occasions.
Okay. Anyone else want to expand on that, or?
No, just going on with Steve, and I think we've had the opportunity to do some installations and if anybody is in the Neenah area, you can see kind of a modular build out of a charging infrastructure at Bergstrom Ford in Neenah, where there's some ground mount solar that's been put in place, a battery energy storage cabinet, and a generator that's out there to support the Mach-E build out, but definitely something that needs to be considered as you move forward. And some of the other things to think about is not only the capacity constraint, but how fast do you need that infrastructure in place to support your vehicles. We've been working with a lot of fleet customers. They're ordering vehicles, and depending on where they're located, it can be quite timely in order to get new service or increased service out there to support that charging needs. And what are some modular or quick deployable type options that may be available to support that?
Yeah, and I'll say, again, that's it's a good kind of shout out on the installation over in Neenah, at Bergstrom over there, in that's a good demonstration of a solution that was very quick to implement. It's something that can be very sustainable from a renewable energy generation standpoint, because I'm able to utilize the energy and battery storage within that installation to then charge electric vehicles. But also I may be able to also take that energy that's unused by the EVs, any excess energy, and push that back to the grid to help actually relieve the load on the grid at that particular site. And to some of the things we talked about earlier from the standpoint of resiliency, I want to make sure I've got charging available in case the grid goes down. That backup generator also then provides that additional resiliency to that microgrid. So really it's a solution that kind of answers and checks off all those boxes.
Okay. So something that we hear a lot about too, and I want to bring this up, and I know how I would answer this, but I'm going to give this to our panelists, is do you think traditional gasoline vehicles will be a thing of the past, or do you think there is room for other types of fueling and technologies?
My personal opinion, we're going to see a mixed variety of vehicles as we continue to move forth. And Matthew here with taking a look at biogas, and depending on use cases, I think we will see different vehicles. One thing that is evident, though, we are going to need to see vehicles that are more climate conscious, more sustainable. Especially with regulations that are being put in place. Our current fueling methods aren't able to meet those, so we will need to move towards an alternative. But I do not think we will see a one fueling system across for all vehicles as we continue to move forward.
Matthew, do you want to add anything to that, or?
I would totally agree with Wade. I think the only other item I was going to add to the previous question is that when talking about municipalities and some of the other entities that would have on-site fueling is the much smaller footprint that's required to incorporate EV charging compared to even on-site diesel storage or some of the gas compression equipment that's required for the CNG vehicles. So if you're looking at that as an option for short transportation vehicles and you have that ability to put that on site, it's another consideration to keep in mind.
And I think at Wisconsin Clean Cities, we are a fuel neutral organization, so we support all of the alternative fuels. And I think that it's just, you know, my answer is that it is going to take a mix of everything. I don't think that we're going to see us going totally in one direction, especially with COVID. You know, a lot of the vehicle manufacturers have had lots of projections on what was going to happen and how fast they were going to roll out the vehicles. I'm not sure that that's going to happen as quickly as they had anticipated. We're seeing that in some of the grants that we're working on. Vehicles that we would have been able to get very quickly are now having like a 6-month lag time being able to get those vehicles. So I'm not sure that the rollout will be as quickly. I mean, I hope that it is, and I hope that everything goes successfully, but I think there's just other factors that we need to take into consideration. But I think it's very important that we be prepared for this, and because it is coming, and as a state, we need to be prepared for this and be getting our infrastructure in place, and then be working with our fleets in order to be able to implement these types of technologies. And having the education, I think that's the first level, is educating people on what's coming and how they can get ready for it. One of the questions too was, are there any funding opportunities for EV fleet operators? And at Clean Cities, we keep our members up to date on the funding opportunities as they become available. There was a funding for vehicles that was out from the PSC at the end of last year, and that of course has expired, but there will be other funding opportunities, I believe, that will be coming out even at a federal level. When we see the stimulus packages coming out, there's going to be funding, and we had done a webinar earlier last year on being grant ready, and that's what we're really focusing on, is telling our members to have your projects in place, know what you want to do, learn what you need to do to be ready, so that when those grant funding opportunities become available, because typically they have a very quick turnaround time, you already have all of your information, and it's easy for us to be able to put that into a grant application instead of waiting until the grant comes out and then trying to get all the partners and projects in place. So you know, working with Flex Technologies and EnTech and getting those projects developed in the first place is a good place to start.
Yeah, I think the one other comment too I was going to make in relation to that, you know, even as we look longer term, I don't think there's going to be a one-size-fits-all approach also. You know, hydrogen's going to have a piece, fossil fuel's still going to have a piece, electrification's going to have a piece, RNG's going to have a piece. I mean, that we're looking at it that way. I mean, we have the ability to look at EV charging, hydrogen, RNG. It really depends on the particular type of vehicle, the application, how it's being utilized, as far as I think what that best solution is going to be. So I think it's going to continue to be a mix, I think, even over time. It's not going to go all one way or another.
Right, I agree.
Yeah.
We do have another question here. It says, why do we need so many public charging stations? Don't most owners and users charge overnight at home or when fleet vehicles aren't used?
The way I like to put it is, we're Americans, and we like convenience, and we also aren't always the best at planning ahead. So I need those public charging stations from that aspect, right? Because I may forget to plug my car in at night. I, for instance, live in Green Bay. My office is in Menasha. I may get up in the morning, jump in my car and go, oh gosh, I don't have enough charge to get myself home. I'm going to have to go and charge someplace. So I need some public facility someplace where I can do that. Either it's my workplace or the electric equivalent of a gas station, right? A fueling station to do that. The other piece of that is, what do I do if I'm traveling across country? And we want to make that easy for people, as easy for people to utilize electric vehicles as we do for fossil fuel vehicles, right? I mean, it's very difficult to drive more than 10, 15, 20 miles without seeing a service station, a gas station, right? A mini mart. It was interesting, about 4 years ago, we were at the Experimental Aircraft Association. This older gentleman comes up to me, he starts talking to me, he says, yeah, I drove my Tesla here from Seattle. And I said, well, how'd that go? He said, well, I made sure I planned my route all the way through so that whenever I stopped at night, I was at a hotel where I either could charge my car at the hotel or at a charging station nearby, or I always tried to pick a restaurant where there was a charging station nearby so I could plug my car in. Because he said I really had to plan to make sure I didn't run out of power between here and there. But he said it worked okay. But again, it's a lot of work to do that, right? And again, being Americans, we want to be able to do things the way we currently do things, right? And the way we currently do things is I don't have to plan ahead where I'm going to fill up my car. I just know that I'm going to have a service station. Well, we're looking at EV infrastructure being that same type of model, right? You know that it's available if you need it.
And absolutely, as someone who has just made a cross-country trip in an EV, I can concur with that.
I guess the one thing
It's much easier in some places than others. Absolutely.
I guess the one thing I'd add just briefly is that when we start looking at energy equity and deploying these to impacted communities, it's not necessarily feasible for them to install charging infrastructure at their homes. So if you have a public charging station that's street access or at a cul-de-sac or nearby schools or something like that, that provides those communities charging infrastructure that may not be able to access otherwise.
Just out of curiosity, do you have any insight on the projection for EV sales in Wisconsin or the Midwest specifically is one of the questions that we got.
I don't have any specific just in the Midwest or Wisconsin. The stats I had were more on a national level, but definitely could follow up on that one.
Mm-hmm. And we actually do have I have a little bit of insight on that as well. So if whoever asked that question, if you want to reach out to us, we'd be happy to follow up with that. Can you talk a little bit about the increased upfront cost for EVs and what kind of return on investments, and even with the infrastructure?
Yeah, I think we can kick that off here. Obviously there's a little bit of a surcharge for the vehicle itself. The vehicles are more expensive than a conventional fueled vehicle that we're seeing. A lot of incentives in place. We're definitely seeing this on the light duty side with a lot of the tax credits that are out there to bring them down to parity. We're working quite a bit in the medium duty and heavy duty truck arena also. And again, there's starting to become more and more grants that are out there. This market is a little bit newer, so it's playing a little bit of catch up. And there is a substantial cost increase for those vehicles. But as these grants and incentives come out, we will see better parity with that. From a charging infrastructure standpoint, there is an additional cost for that. But if you take a look at overall fueling cost in the modeling that we've seen to date, it is cheaper to fuel your vehicle on electric than it is gasoline on an ongoing basis. And there is the a total cost of return on investment with something with that there. Additionally, you see decrease in service for electric vehicles. With regenerative braking systems, you're not using, less use on brakes than you would see before. You don't have any more oil changes. You have much less mechanical parts. I come from an automotive background. That's where I really began. In the construction of these vehicles is quite a bit more simplistic than what you would have with our conventional vehicles right now. Really, when you take into account the engines and transmissions that are put in place and are no longer needed. So there is definitely a cost advantage as you move forward. I don't have specific numbers on me, Steve. I'm not sure if you have any specific data on that return on investment, but there definitely is a reduction, and it's really getting over that upfront initial cost and grants and incentives helping to reduce that.
Yeah, I don't have anything specific, just some early indicators, again, because the market's fairly young. But to your point, as every indication that the overall lifetime cost of ownership is going to be much more viable on EV vehicles than fossil fuel vehicles. Again, think about a fossil fuel vehicle. It's a very complex machine, right? when you look at fueling systems, engine systems, transmissions, differentials, all of that goes away with an electric vehicle. And to your point, even from a braking standpoint, I have less brake pad wear, for instance. I don't have to change brake pads as often. The gentleman I talked to had 75,000 miles on his Tesla and had never changed the brakes. Never had it in for service. I definitely cannot say that with any of my 3 cars. They're all fossil fuel powered, right? So again, every early indication is the lifetime cost of ownership is going to be much lower for an electric vehicle, which helps offset then that initial cost. From a charging standpoint, as you put out earlier, Lorrie, I still have that ability. I can plug my car into my wall at home, right? I just have to be a little more patient about how long it's going to take to charge, but I don't really have to have anything special from a charging standpoint in my house, as long as I'm patient.
Just one brief comment is that as the market evolves, I think we're going to see more availability of cost calculators, and I'm sure that Lorrie has access to a number of those that she would be willing to share. But as an example, I think it was even just a week or so ago, Peterbilt launched their own EV cost ownership. So if you're interested in deploying these in your fleet, there are tools available for you to make some initial estimates before you get into conversations with experts like Lorrie or Wade or Steve with your actual deployments.
So I think that's a good point, Matthew. And in fact, we even have modeling tools that we can by location. Again, because electric rates, fuel rates are not the same in San Diego as they are in Seattle, as they are in Green Bay, Wisconsin, right? But we have those tools that we can actually model both for the electrical and for the fossil fuel side of things to compare what's the cost of operating that vehicle in those different geographies, and help someone from a fleet standpoint, make that best determination. What's the best vehicle to use in this particular location? Right now, some locations, unless you have a sustainability initiative, may be better to actually utilize a fossil fuel vehicle from a cost standpoint. While other areas, far and away, EVs are much more cost effective to operate than a fossil fuel car is, or truck, I should say. So we have those tools, and we can model, we can compare those across geographies.
Yes, and as Matthew said, we do have those available through the U.S. Department of Energy. We work very closely with the national laboratories, and so those tools are available. We also have an evolution tool, EVolution, which is for consumers to be able to see and compare a fossil fuel vehicle to an electric vehicle. And it actually does take into consideration the zip code and the rates. So there are lots of tools that are available out there. We're happy to help anyone to do that. We have time for one last question. And so I thought, let's see, so this one says, do you see incorporation of time of use rates or demand response to lessen strain on the grid for charging? Example include incentivizing people to charge overnight rather than during peak energy times.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Wade, do you want to go ahead?
Well, absolutely. It's when you charge, and that's something we talk about modeling is very important. And let's say you're a fleet customer and everyone comes back to the depot at 4 o'clock and everyone plugs in. How do you offset that so that you don't take that demand on right away and get those better rates that are later at night? And as part of this overall system, and something we didn't cover, it's not only the charging infrastructure, but there is charger management software that sits over the top of this. That's crucially important that you can set up when do you want to charge and take advantage of those rates that are best for you to reduce your overall cost in your utility bills.
Yeah, and the other piece of that too, that and in fact we see this in California now, and I think you're going to see it more also, is what's available from a generation standpoint versus that usage profile. So one thing we've seen in California now, California's had a big initiative to install a lot of solar, right? So now I've got cheap renewable energy available during the daytime, and they've been shifting their demand and their peak use time rates to off daytime, to evening hours now, which a lot of people have complained about. But hey, that's when it's more expensive for them to generate because it's not able to come from those solar sources they have during the day. So electricity's become very economical in the middle of the afternoon, but it's much more expensive now in the evenings. And I think you're going to see that continued adjustment.
Well, we've had some great questions, and it seems like we might have to have another webinar just to continue this conversation, but I will thank you for being here today, and I'm going to turn it over to Kelly.
Yeah, first and foremost, thank you presenters for being here today with us. We did, as Lori mentioned, have quite a few questions actually that did not get answered. So attendees, if your questions did not get answered, please feel free to contact our presenters directly. Their information is up on the slide right now. And thank you once again to our presenters for sharing your expertise with us. We very much appreciate it. We couldn't do what we do without you. So thank you once again. And thank you attendees for joining us today for the Innovative Wisconsin EV Solutions webinar. We appreciate your time and hope you enjoyed the webinar today. And we hope you have a great rest of the day. Thanks so much.